Awesome. Another episode of Technical Explanation Show. I am here with Rex Anderson. Rex hails out of Texas. Rex, give him a wave and say something so the camera picks you up.
Hey, how's everybody doing? Glad to be here, Bryce, and it's an honor to be from Texas, out of Texas, the past 20 years, and representing Texas wrestling and Texas wrestling officiating. It's an honor to be here and looking forward to putting this together. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, no, thank you. You're helping me with my goal. I get to check Texas off. I hope I talk to a whole bunch more officials, but this is helping me check off one of the 50 states that I'm trying to do. I want to get all 50 states done, not in 2021, but in 365 days from like 48 days ago when we started. So thank you. Gosh, tell the folks, like, it's been a whirlwind for me. Talking with so many new people, doing we did that pre-screen call, and then some emails, files, all that stuff. And then now we're here finally, which is awesome. Just tell me about like how we got connected, and then like why you're like, yeah, I'll go talk to this guy I'd never met about wrestling.
Sure. No. And I appreciate that, Bryce, putting it all together. To be totally honest with you, a couple of buddies of mine were on your show kind of in the beginning. Harry McDonald, Fred Feeney, very close with both of them, called many of hundreds of matches and tournaments and events with both of them out of the Ohio area, and look up to both of them and still consider them mentors and peers to me as well. So I listened to their podcast and their interviews that you had with them. And coincidentally, not a day or even a week later, you put out a call for contacts kind of around the country. I think I contacted you, told you I was interested, be more than glad to do it. At the same time, my buddy Feeney also tagged me in one of your posts and had you contact. And I think by then we had already had our first phone call. So it's neat how the community, although as big as we are, is incredibly small and in touch with each other. And so again, I think it's a great opportunity. And again, if you're looking for square miles, covering Texas, we're gonna encompass probably 15 to 20 states if you do it by square miles. So take a look at it that way.
Hey, just in the spirit of full transparency, I may have been working you from both angles.
It's all good.
I might have been. Just met Harry, actually. That was my first show.
Okay.
And that's, you just said family, or this the wrestling community. I'm sorry, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's the coolest thing about it. Like, you wrestle, it doesn't matter like what level of success you've achieved. You have that shared bond. And so like I put out that call, and then Harry's awesome. Feeney, I had to remind him that he's called my matches when I was in high school. Like,
I'm sorry.
And him and my dad probably have gotten into it too, because my dad was a coach too. But it's pretty cool, like when you're younger, how you view an official versus when you get a little bit older, and then like I'm asking a favor of them now instead of like, sure, hey, let me wrestle on the edge, bud. So it's pretty cool. And Fred, I can't say enough about him. Like, he's helping me put some cool stuff together. So what tournaments do you circuit Super 32 with Harry? Or?
I'm trying to think. Harry and a guy named George Dixon out of the South Carolina area started calling with them 20 years ago. We called everything from NCAA club wrestling nationals to even larger tournaments, national duels, those types of things that we all kind of called together. Got hooked up with Harry through George, and Harry and I've seen each other at several tournaments around the year: national duels, college national duels. I'm trying to think of NCAA national duels, Wheaton. Harry and I've called it Wheaton several times, which is a large D3 tournament out of the Chicago area. And as Fred Feeney constantly reminds me every year, it's the longest running wrestling tournament in the United States, other than the D1 Nationals. Wheaton is. And so it's an honor to continue to do the Wheaton tournament year after year. And I think I've been there now 12 years in a row at Wheaton. It's just a great D3 tournament.
Wow. Do you have any idea, like approximate, like how many years then to make it the second longest tournament? Like,
I have no idea.
I'm gonna look it up.
I think Fred knows, because he probably called the very first one. He's Fred's. I'm just kidding, Fred Feeney. He's Fred's been around it with Coach Grunwald there at Wheaton, and so absolutely would have the history there. It's the Pete Wilson, tournament there, but yeah, it's a fantastic D3 tournament.
I gotta say this just because I think it's funny. And Fred Fred will give me some junk for it too, but yeah, he was
Love
around. He was around when the Dead Sea was just sick, right?
He was, I think we were wrestling in fig leaves back in the day.
So, again, you know this, but for fans of this technical explanation show, I'm not sure if it's the first time you tuned in. If it is, welcome. Glad to have you here. But the whole purpose of this show is a couple purposes. It's really to shed light on wrestling officials, because without them, there is no competition. If you want to argue with me, it's fine. You'll turn blue in the face before I give up on that point. There's some things going on that we need to address. So that's what we're trying to do before it's too late. But the other thing is tell these stories. As human beings, we just like stories, right? Like, think about it back at the earliest civilizations. How did you learn, like, where you lived and stuff, right? You didn't read a book. Like, people told you a story. Like, if they just told you, you wouldn't remember it, but if they put in a story, you remember it. So it's to tell those memorable stories. So I want to start with your wrestling story. Do you remember your earliest, or what's the earliest wrestling experience that you can remember?
Wrestling experience. My earliest experience was starting YMCA wrestling as a 4-year-old in Ponca City, Oklahoma. I'm from Oklahoma. Ponca City is my hometown. If you're obviously in the wrestling community, especially around Oklahoma, you're very familiar with Ponca City. Several Olympic champions have come from the Ponca City and Ponca City area. Ponca City, Perry, Stillwater, Oklahoma State area, all within about 35 miles of each other there. Doug Bluebaugh, Shelby Wilson, the Wilson family, the Bluebaugh family, all Olympic champions were just bred and graduated all from Ponca City, Oklahoma. I remember wrestling all the way through junior high and high school with these Olympic champions, sitting up in the very top row of the stands and being aware of their presence and having them there. And I was a mediocre wrestler at best, but I loved it. I loved the family that was created by there. I loved the technical side of it, which is obviously what brought me into officiating. And so when I graduated high school, was very close to one of the officials there, a NCAA official by the name of David Kincaid, who also lived in Ponca City. He was a veterinarian, very successful veterinarian in Ponca City, Oklahoma. And David took me on a couple of my first trips. He said, "Hey, come on, let's go." We did a couple of high school tournaments in Geary, Oklahoma, and in Perry, Oklahoma, which are two of the largest continually still running wrestling tournaments in the country. And then also took me to my first NCAA events at Southwest Missouri State, Central Oklahoma. So I got started on the college level right out of the gate, and I wasn't worth a darn. But getting thrown into the fire, head first into the fire on the collegiate level, got you prepared pretty quickly for the kind of heat that you were going to take. And, some of the stuff I'd like to talk about today is, being given opportunities and deciding at that time what you want to make out of those opportunities. So, straight out of that, got me involved in officiating on the front end. And I was maybe 18, 19 years old right out of high school when I started officiating wrestling. And several years later, moved to the city of Houston, where I was in law enforcement and a police officer there, and got involved in the wrestling community in Houston, which in Texas at that time was very much in its infancy. Wrestling had just come out of the private school sector and was getting popular in the public schools. And this is early 2000s, around 2001, 2002. And got hooked up with the local association there, very small at the time. As one of the biggest kudos to Texas wrestling, Bryce, is that due to Title IX laws at the time, Texas already had girls and boys wrestling separate. And so those familiar with Title IX says that for every boys sport, you have to have a girls sport as well in the schools. And Texas at the time was already separated. So as other schools as other states were dropping programs because they couldn't match up enough female sports with male sports, Texas was adding programs. And here we are 20 years later, and Texas continues to add programs at a monumental rate, so much that I don't have enough officials to cover all the events, even though the year before COVID, we had 285 registered officials in the state of Texas, and we still could not cover all of our events. So wrestling is strong in Texas. The number of programs are strong in Texas, and a large part of that is due to the advent of female wrestling, girls wrestling on the high school, women's wrestling in the college levels. And again, if you start looking at a lot of the recruits on the college side, you're going to see a large handful of those being from Texas, hailing from Texas. And then one of our proudest monumental wrestlers just won an Olympic medal, right, at the gold level. So she made us proud, and hails from Houston, hails from Katy, which is where I'm from, refereed several of her high school matches. So just a great story that I've been lucky to be involved in.
Awesome, man. There's a lot there to unpack, and I want to dive into a few of the different things. So you mentioned, you're pretty young. You started at 4 in the YMCA. That's a common theme with at least the first, this is like, I think 15 or 16. I can't keep track of it, man. I got so many shows to get live. But anyhow, like, you're young, and you mentioned, like, this is this hotbed of like these great wrestlers. Like, were you like, was that like, would you see them if you went to a wrestling tournament? Would you see them as a little kid, or like, were you exposed to that greatness? Or
yeah,
like,
sure, absolutely. Our junior highs at the time in northern Oklahoma, we had 2 junior highs that fed into the one high school. So we only had one high school at the time, and Ponca City was an oil-driven town, the home of Conoco. And so we had a pretty good population, around 35,000 people in the city that I was from. And again, we're 40 miles north of Stillwater, where Oklahoma State is. And so, and we're even closer to Perry, Oklahoma, Blackwell, Oklahoma, Newkirk, where Mark Branch is from, and wrestled and was a multiple-time state tournament, or state champion. Coaching at Wyoming now. I mean, it just oozed wrestling. Basketball wasn't as strong, obviously, in northern Oklahoma as wrestling was, and so you were just around it all day. As a junior high wrestler, we would practice with the high school all the time, camps, AAU, freestyle, Greco-Roman, year round. You were exposed to it, and so it just kind of got in your blood, and you got involved in it. It didn't make me much of a better wrestler. I still wasn't as good as what I wanted to be, or as what I thought I was in my head. But however, it formed strong bonds, many of which I still have today, and even several of those that I still officiate with today that were wrestling partners with me in junior high. A coach in Texas was my wrestling partner. A coach in Midwest City, Oklahoma was my wrestling partner. An official who was my wrestling partner is still an official out of Perry, Oklahoma today. So, those bonds and family ties are made early on and continue throughout our lives.
You mean to tell me that wrestling talent doesn't get transferred through osmosis? You have to actually work hard?
Not in my case, it wasn't. No,
yeah.
sir.
Yeah, me neither, man. Hey, all right. So, police officer, I'm going to touch on that a little bit. You are not the first police officer I've had on the show that is an official. I've also had quite a few that have a military background as well. And I just think it's kind of neat, like, not too many shows in, but to see kind of, there's the consistency of like wrestling holding everyone together, obviously. But then to see so many folks that like chose a profession of service, I guess. And then I think of officiating wrestling as a service too, right? I mean, you're not getting rich. You don't have to do it. You get a little verbally abused sometimes. But then one of my guests just said, they're like, a lot of these guys don't work in public facing businesses, right? Maybe a desk job or something, but the folks that are like bankers or customer service or sales or police officers or military, they have to work with people. Like, sure. in those last 3, if they don't, your safety's compromised. So I think that just says about the kind of person that looks at doing this. And I don't know. I don't know why I think that's just so neat, but it says something about you and all those other folks. A shout out. I'm going to miss so many people, but Sean Petty was one of my first guests, and he is a Marine, did 2 tours, came back, became a police officer for like 20 more years, then retired. And he's like, I'll officiate and I'll be an umpire and I'll do all this stuff. And I'm just like, man, it's cool. Anyhow, that's mine. Bo Nickal, he's from Texas too, right?
Bo Nickal is from Texas. I think, Bo started out his early career in New Mexico, if I remember right, but then came to Texas into high school. And again, everyone knows the Bo Nickal story, and even as successful as he is now, moving into the next realm. But he came through Texas, came through our state tournament, and was left quite a legacy in his wake for sure.
I got to ask you a question. So about, his senior year, I mean, he was on a tear. He didn't like lose a match for if you lose a match for like in 2 years, I don't know, maybe one.
I don't remember his exact record, but
it wasn't many.
Everybody was aware of him and his talents.
Do you remember his hair though? Like the one year at Penn State, he like dyed it blue, right? And so I get to do youth tournaments, mostly 12U, and it was almost like 8 years after Cale Sanderson won his fourth. You look at a bracket, there's 6 Cales. Like every kid had blue hair.
Yeah, everyone.
And I'm just like, that's the impact. We're in Ohio.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we shouldn't like Penn State.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But it's just those athletes that have that impact, like wrestling when it goes beyond that.
Yeah, for sure.
And then with the Title IX stuff, which is kind of funny, because this is the second time Title IX's come up today. So I don't know if you're listening or whatever, my Apple or my Amazon device is streaming what I'm talking about out there. But I mean, what are you seeing there? Is it still growing at that pace because you guys are set up for success? The female, ladies and women's and girls wrestling, or is it plateaued, or what do you see?
No, it's still absolutely growing. As long as our population is growing in the state, and as long as schools continue to be added, wrestling is an easy add because, obviously it adds a girls sport and a boys sport at the same time. It's, typically back in my day, if you had football, you had to have girls volleyball. And if you had basketball, well, you could add both of those. You had baseball and softball for boys and girls. But wrestling wouldn't get added unless you had that other girls sport that could go along with it. And when I first moved to Texas, girls wrestling was new to me. And this is in 2002, right? And growing up, if girls wanted to wrestle, they had to wrestle boys in the same competition level and the same tournaments and things like that. When I came to Texas, they were separate. So I still remember the first girls match and the first tournament that I officiated with girls in it. It was tough. At the time, 20 years ago, I was an official who would put your hand on their shoulder to stop them. You'd blow the whistle, whatever. And as a male official, first seeing 2 girls wrestle at the same time, I had to totally change my style. It made me back up quite a bit. It made me stop touching wrestlers all around, which was a good mechanic, to get away from, just because of the comfort level that was there and the perception that may be there as well. But what it's done for the wrestling community and the exposure of wrestling is invaluable. We cannot put a price or a value on the importance of girls wrestling and women's wrestling as it relates to Texas, the United States, and even the world moving forward. And I'm talking on an Olympic scale. And it's just great to be a part of it in the state of Texas. And I'm so proud of the programs that we have here. I mean, we have girls programs that have won state tournaments, for 8, 7, 8, 10 years in a row, just because what it does is, as you're aware in every other state, once you start getting some of that fame and notoriety, then wrestling breeds success, and success breeds more success. And so those girls start getting involved earlier at the youth level, the junior high level, at the camps and the programs around the state. And so you just basically build a dynasty, and we're very well aware of it. And hopefully every now and then, a surprise team comes from around the corner and starts to be very successful. And it's great to see several of these coaches, even coming in from out of the state, building their own programs. And many of them start on the girls' side and find success on the girls' side because there's so many willing participants. And it's great. And Bryce, I can't tell you how heartwarming it is for me now as a dad who has a daughter who's 24 years old, to see girls who may be a little bit bigger in weight, and I'm walking a balance beam here of trying to say the right thing, but to see an athletic female participating in sports that she's able to show her talent, show her strength, show her adversity, and her perseverance, and the amount of time that she puts in, and the strength that she puts on, and the technique that she learns to be successful. Yet, we're not concentrating on just females who weigh 105 pounds. These are competitors who are able to be successful at all weights throughout the spectrum in NFHS on the high school side, and to see them win and win repeatedly due to the amount of work and preparedness that they put in. It's just it's heartwarming. That's all I can say.
Dude, that's awesome. I can't imagine. I'm not a parent, but that's a really cool perspective actually to consider. And I always like hearing different perspectives, because I will think about that later. I do promise you that. But sure. Yeah, I mean, it took us a while. Obviously, Texas had a little bit different of a path. Ohio, we're not sanctioned yet. There's 33 states that are sanctioned. One of my, I'm not gonna say that. I was gonna say one of my favorite episodes. I love them. They're all my favorites. But I had a great episode with Vanessa Oswalt, senior level woman. She trained in the first ever female team. And to have her perspective on there, and then Brian Nicola and Mark Neiman. This is from Columbus, Ohio.
Sure.
They started a program 3 years ago, so right before COVID. And a lot of what you're just saying, they said. And it's one of the things is it's neat when someone says something and you're like, huh, that makes a lot of sense. But then when you hear 2 or 3 other people that you respect and that have been doing things for a while and doing them right, and they say the other thing, that's when you're like, the pieces start to click. And one of the things I picked up from them was, we started this program and the girls had to wrestle with the boys, right? I mean, that's just what it is. It's a logistics nightmare, right? I mean, do you have 2 locker rooms when you schedule practices? You have 2 wrestling rooms, all of that stuff, right? I'm glad I don't have to think about that.
Sure.
They said, when we went and we walked the halls and we said to these girls and said, hey, would you like to come up for wrestling? And by the way, you don't have to wrestle with the guys. It's just all girls. They said 20 kids the next year from 6. So it's amazing what happens when you just give people a seat at the table.
Sure.
Because if you've never seen anything in your life, like if you've never seen someone that looks like you, that has the same sort of, lifestyle as you, let's just say the same gender, that's what I'm saying. And you never see a successful woman win a gold medal or 4 or 5, what do we win? 4 medals in the Olympics and then like 4 at the Worlds. If you never see that, how in your head could you be like, I could do that? Sure. But then when you do see it, now that narrative changes. Like, could be me.
Yeah.
So it's going to save our sport. It really is. Because think about all the women that could be officials.
I agree. And we're, it's a great segue. If you don't mind me taking off with that.
This is your time, man. I'm just here.
Hey, listen, women's officiating in Texas is alive and well and coming on. I've just looked through my registration numbers for our state yesterday, and Texas is separated into 7 chapters, obviously a huge state, second only to Alaska in square miles and footage there. But
they got much wrestling up in Alaska.
They do have wrestling. I would bet that we still have them in numbers.
I think you got them
on that side. But we're separated into 7 chapters, and I was looking at our very smallest chapter. Obviously, everyone's familiar with the metro areas: Houston, Dallas, El Paso, Austin, San Antonio, Amarillo. But our smallest chapter is in the Valley, the Rio Grande Valley, which is the very southern tip of Texas, down where Mexico meets Texas on the southern end, right on the Gulf of Mexico area. And as of yesterday, we have 10 females registered out of that chapter alone. Just out of that chapter, we have 10 females registered. And so our numbers on the female side are increasing very much. It's my job and it's our job as an association to retain them, make sure that they're trained, they're mentored, they're guided, they're protected, and given the opportunity to advance as well. And I think Texas does a great job in that. On the other side of that, we've had 2 females here in the state of Texas officiate the state tournament. Most recently, we had a female who's called the last 2 state tournaments, an ex-military and ex-wrestler also. She came in and—
What was her name again?
I'm sorry?
Do you know her name?
Her name is Kim Hernandez. Kim's out of our San Antonio chapter and is actually the president of the San Antonio chapter, just voted in this year. But last year, she was voted in to do her first state tournament. And here in Texas, we take 30 officials to the state tournament. And she ranked number 15 in her very first year officiating. And so she was invited back last year as well, voted back in, and ranked also top 15 last year in the officials. And so a very, very good official. And the reason for that, the several reasons for that, obviously, is the amount of time and effort that she puts in. A good wrestling background. She was a successful wrestler in high school, but she asked the right questions, right? And she was a sponge. Where do I need to go? How do I get exposure? Who do I need to talk to? And kind of our mentoring, our whole mentoring style here in Texas is go out and see as many officials as you can, get as much exposure as you can, rather than saying, hey, Bryce, follow me. I'm going to teach you everything you need to know. I want you to be a mirror and a protege of me. We're saying exactly the opposite. Go find 20 people. Watch 20 people officiate. You take a little bit of his, a little bit of hers, a little bit of theirs, what you see on the internet, what you see on YouTube videos, watch, some of the wrestling shows and things like that. And then out of that, you create your own style, what's comfortable for you. Try things. Try things in those tournaments, in those consolation matches. Try some different positioning, some different techniques. Find out what it is. And Kim's traveling the country now, going to Las Vegas, to South Dakota, South Carolina, all across the country, getting that exposure. And people around the country now know her name, but more than they know her name, they know her abilities and her talents. And we're lucky to have her here. And we're going to make sure that she doesn't go outside the state lines for as long as we're involved.
You wrap that up perfectly, because obviously and rightfully so, the camera's on you when you're talking, but I'm like over here, like writing all these notes down.
Fantastic.
I even highlighted it off of line. I'm putting it out in the ether, so I hold myself responsible, Rex.
Sure.
We got to connect. I got to figure out what you're doing that no one else can figure out in Texas.
You got it.
Because we're trying. I know I'm going to get this wrong, because some people have told me, but to my knowledge, we have one female official in the entire state of wrestling. Now, I'm going to make some outrageous claims here, but I think we're one of the top 5 states as far as All-Americans every year at the D1 level. I'm not keeping track of D2, D3, but I mean, you look at even, I'm loving on Ohio here, but you got, David Taylor, Logan Stieber, Jay Bergman. Ohio's put some people out there.
Without a doubt.
But we just can't seem to figure that out. So I'm going to connect with you on that, because that shouldn't be the thing. But you said another thing, and this day has just been awesome, by the way, because I just been talking wrestling all day. Sweet. But
what a gig.
It's not bad, man. But one of the guests I spoke with today was talking about female officials. Actually, his name is Bill Olson. He's in Minnesota. And he was talking about, when the first time he had kind of interactions with female officials and female wrestlers. And he said the biggest difference is that they ask questions. They want to know details. It's not, all right, it's an outside step and then cut the corner and drive across. Now it's an outside step. My right hand is going to go to his bicep, and this is why I'm doing that, because I'm pulling down and I'm pushing up at the same time. But they want to understand, and I think what that says is that, and we all know this, that men and women think differently. So why do we, if that's true, and I believe it is, why would we think we can do the exact same things to teach people their own styles to officiate or to recruit them when they think completely different? So I think maybe what you're doing there is like empowering people. You're essentially letting them be autonomous and saying, hey, do your own thing. We're going to do it right. Develop your own style. And by the way, this is how you can do it. But, if you want to do it a different way. Really,
it is,
cool,
Bryce.
man.
And it's not only that, it's not only getting, there's several different steps to retaining an official. First of all is the recruitment, getting them to sign up, getting them interested, showing them that they can sign up, how easy it is, but also that they're going to be mentored. They're going to be mentored. They're going to be guided, protected on that. And then finally given opportunities. They're going to be given solid opportunities that mean a lot, opportunities at varsity wrestling. What is their goal? Sit down with them, find out what their goals are. Has been very successful for us here in Texas. We ask that of all of our officials, especially when they start out. And is what is your goals? How are those going to change? Is your goal to finally officiate a varsity event one of these days? Yes. Then after that, change your goals. I want to do a district tournament. I want to do a regional tournament. I'd love to see the state tournament one time in my life. Great. I'd love to call a college match at some level. Great. Is providing these opportunities, but also giving them the mentorship and the leadership and the guidance to be able to get there and be successful so that they can stay there, right? That's been very important to us to show them. Oftentimes, and I'll throw this out there, it's probably going to be very controversial, especially with my male colleagues, but as males, we've got to put our ego on the side a little bit and realize, not only for females, but for all new officials and all young officials, that I'm bringing this young official in. It's my job to guide them and mentor them. And you know what? They might be better than me. They might pass me up. They might do at 26 what it took me to do at 38 years old, on that level. If we can put that ego aside, give them those opportunities, we're going to be paid back a whole lot more, in good karma and success of the sport, success of officiating than we would be if we bring them in and we only teach them enough to not be quite as good as what we are, right? We're teaching them that 80% of what we know and still keeping them back. And that's what I think Texas has done. And I'm not taking any credit for this. That's what Texas has done is our chapters are giving the opportunities we're putting together a good mentoring program and a training program, and then having opportunities for these female officials and young officials every year to be able to succeed. In our state bylaws, we actually have it written into our state bylaws that 15% of officials every year at the state tournament must be first-year state tournament officials, not new officials, right? They're not rookies, but to the state tournament. So we're guaranteeing that we at least turn over 15%, and oftentimes it's more. Oftentimes we've had 20% new officials coming to the state tournament. So we are guaranteeing that we are putting in new blood to the state tournament every single year. And that, again, it's just worked out. Now, that's not to say that we're not putting people in, it's not to say that we're putting people in who are not worthy or not qualified. They are. They've been tested. They've been tried. They've been evaluated. They've been successful at that. However, that's our goal, to ensure, the future of Texas wrestling officiating stays strong, and it's not just a bunch of, 65-year-old guys who are going to retire in the next year.
How does I'm trying to understand. So first, before I get the other one, how many divisions are there in Texas?
There's two. We separated. I want to say maybe 6 or 7 years ago, we separated into a 5A and a 6A grouping, or 4A, 5A. I don't remember what letter it is, but we just separated about 6 or 7 years ago into two classes.
You used to be one.
We used to be one. And hey, this, I'm going to get on my soapbox again. It was great when we were one class. It was a lot of wrestling, right? But what it did, Bryce, is it had one true state champion, right? You didn't have 4 state champions, which I'm not saying there's not anything wrong with that. But if you were the state champion of Texas, when Bo Nickal wrestled, he was the state champion of Texas, right?
It's like California. You win California, you're the king.
That's it.
There's 15
That's it.
kings.
Brandon Slay, another state champion out of Texas. We've had some tremendous names, but then we separated into two classes. The good side of that now is we're putting twice as many wrestlers at the state tournament. So, there's definitely advantages to that. So 2 classes, and we run a 16-man bracket at the state tournament every year out of 4 different regions. So the top 4 qualifiers out of 4 regions come to state.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. I didn't know that. It's like you said, it's a huge state, 2 divisions.
Sure.
That's interesting. Yeah. Ohio, there's 3. It's been that way as long as I've been alive. Back in the 70s it was too, I think.
Sure.
And there's 2 sides to every coin, right? So like with Texas 7 years ago, now twice as many people are getting a look at college.
For sure. Many opportunities. Absolutely. Yeah. And we're having more participants, right? If you've just now doubled your chance of being able to hit the state tournament. So it's great exposure for sure.
Yeah. But I hear you on the 1 division thing. I really do. I can see arguments for both sides. Not arguments. They're suggestions, right? We all want. We all want the best product, like as fans and spectators or whatever thing is. But there is something to say about 1 division, and I'm a little biased here, but there's an organization in Ohio called the Ohio Athletic Committee, and they started 20 something years ago, and the goal was we want to keep Ohio's level of wrestling where it is and make it better. Now, people that have gone through this tournament, David Taylor was a 2-time champ, 1 division. Logan Stever, 2-time champ before we had grade school. Now there's like 7 Jay Jaggers. And so I can see, like, you win that tournament and you're in 7th grade, like the future could be pretty good, pretty
Absolutely.
bright. And there's something to say about that, right? Like, I'm the king, but yeah, that's awesome. So you said before we got into that, how does, and let me preface this by saying this, a few months ago, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this podcast. I should probably learn the rules so I can speak intelligently with these people that have been doing this almost as long as I've been alive. And I went to look to sign up, and I'm in Ohio. So I go there and I sign up, and then there's just no classes. There's none. And I've told this to some people that matter, and I think they're fixing it. But on the flip side of that, what does Texas do different to make it easier for someone, like reduce that friction for someone to like sign up, take a class, become an official? What do you guys do? Is it mostly, do they go online and fill something out, or? What do you guys do?
Yes, several different ways. Even though we're a huge state, we are all connected, and we are one association. So we're not separated into different associations across the state. We do have 7 chapters, but even those 7 chapters are all part of one organization, the Texas Wrestling Officials Association, and even our state athletic association, the University Interscholastic League, or the UIL, actually runs wrestling and runs all sports and all secondary activities for high schools. Is that it's in their language that they use a Texas Wrestling Officials Association, a TWA official. So if you have a state sanctioned event, you will use one of our officials. We are the only shop in town, and we police our own. And so we're very big on staying in touch with our coaches. I'm most prideful of our relationship with the coaching community here in Texas. This past weekend, we ran a joint rules clinic with the Texas Wrestling Coaches Association that we were together as one large group for the first half of the day. We talked about new rules, techniques, tough calls at the state tournament, how we're grouped as officials, how we're selected as officials, coaches' inputs, coaches' evaluations, those types of things. And then the second part of the second part of the day in the afternoon, we separated into officials only and coaches only. Again, so this is it's a great example of the relationship we have with the coaches, that we are one community. I say all that, Bryce, to say that we get several referrals, whether it's coaches giving us an email address or a phone number of an official, or officials, especially those who may move into the state and be new to the state, can simply Google Texas Wrestling Officials Association and get our contact page. They put their information in. We route it to the correct chapter, one of 7 chapters, and the leadership in that chapter contacts that person and lets them know how to get hooked up, whether that's in the middle of March, whether that's in June and July in the off season for folk style and collegiate style wrestling, or whether that's smack dab in the middle of competition season in December. We reach out to them immediately and get them involved in that. Obviously, from our side, we're trying to find that experienced official who may come in from another state, from a job transfer or a family transfer or whatever it is, and get them on the mat as soon as we can to help us out with numbers, because we still do have issues at times where we can't provide officials to all events just because we're so overloaded with the number of events that are there, even though we have 285 officials that are signed up. But we've got a lot of officials. The amount of wrestling in Texas still exceeds our abilities.
I was on mute. I do that. That's a good problem to have, I guess. It's still a problem, right?
Sure.
But the thing I'm going to take from that is, if a state as large as Texas with as much wrestling in demand, and you have a lot of officials, and you're still running into some of the same issues that these other states I'm talking with. But if you can have one association with a chapter model under it and keep communication across this vast states,
sure.
I mean, it is 2021. We can communicate. We're doing it right now. Like, it can be done. You just have to want to do it. But I think that that's a model that other people should maybe look at, because it's less clutter and there's less telephone, right? Like, how do you get one message from the governing body to all the associations, right? You can send a mass email, but then that goes to someone and they disseminate it one way. It's still telephone, right?
Right. Exactly.
But if one message is going out, the message is the message, right?
For sure.
That's kind of important when you're the keepers of the rules.
Without a doubt.
Keepers of the
it's been a successful program for us, and we've taken it to other states. I know we've given our message in Louisiana, in Kansas, in Colorado, other states. And then when I travel on the collegiate side, I know there's 3 or 4 of us here in Texas that travel on the collegiate side across the nation at times. And that's probably the biggest question that I get from any other official across the country is, hey, that's great. What are you guys doing in Texas? How did you get so successful with keeping those numbers and growing your numbers on there? And especially with girls wrestling. It's always about girls wrestling, and how are we retaining our officials continuing to move forward, I think is the most questions that I ever get.
Yeah, it's always good when people reach out to you for ideas, because it says that you're doing
Sure.
something right. And also, to circle back and just tie it all together, earlier you had mentioned sometimes the best thing we can do is like put our ego at the door and just be human. I always like to say comfortably vulnerable. I'm not saying cry or sing kumbaya, but I'm just saying, like, just open yourself up, be a human, right?
Yeah.
And so, if you can do that there, like, why can't we do it everywhere else?
Yeah. If we can't put the ego aside, we're not going to be successful. Not at all.
All right, man. I got some more questions for you. Still good on time?
Sure. Love it. Go ahead.
Okay. Let's talk about your first. We talked about your first wrestling story. You're 4 years old at the YMCA.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was your first time on the mat with the whistle around your neck? Like, how did you feel?
Yeah.
What emotions? Like, okay, imagine, I don't know if you're in a locker room, a coach's office, the hospitality room or whatever, they set you there. Like, what are you sitting down and thinking for the first time you officiate, a match?
Sure. And this is going back to 1991. I remember, again, David Kincaid, a very successful NCAA official. Many of you may have seen the video continues to get regurgitated every year or two that shows Dan Gable, with Iowa wrestling at Oklahoma State. And there's an official yelling at Dan Gable on the mat. Dan's upset about a call. This official comes off the mat onto the apron and yelling at Dan Gable at Oklahoma State University when Iowa was wrestling Oklahoma State there. That was David Kincaid, kind of a crazy hair, a little bit bald on top, crazy hair, very vocal official. He was all in it. He was in my hometown.
Does he have no fear whatsoever?
He had absolutely zero fear.
Because I wouldn't say anything mean to Mr. Gable right now. You see him on an Aerodyne at his age?
Not at all. I wouldn't either. But just
no. I mean, it's awesome. That's cool.
I've seen the video 100 times, and I grew up with this with David Kincaid as my official. I wrestled with his son all the way through school. His son was a very successful wrestler as well. And David took me. He said, "Hey, I've got a tournament. If you're interested in officiating, come with me. I need some help." Well, I'm sorry, he didn't even ask me if I was interested in officiating. He said, "Hey, I've got a shirt for you. Get some black pants. Come with me. We're going to Missouri." We went to Central Missouri and called a tournament. My very first tournament. I didn't even have a rule book at the time. I knew wrestling. I knew the spirit of wrestling and the strategy of wrestling. Stepped on a college mat, and I was blinded by the light, as they'll say. I got caught up in the action. I got too close. I got bumped. I got kicked. I blew calls. Coaches didn't even argue with me because they knew I didn't know. I mean, it was that type of thing. But that opportunity, Bryce, showed me as I was driving home, man, I need to get in the rules. If I'm going to be successful at this, and I really liked it, and it kept me close to the sport, I needed to get into the rules and find out a lot of these nuances that I had no idea about. And that's where it began. So it started from there. I remember my first, regional tournament. I remember my first state tournament. I remember coming to Texas, doing the first state tournament. Every time those emotions get tied up again, all the way into my first, college qualifier, regional qualifier for the national tournament. And then my first NCAA tournament, as a D3 level, got to the NCAA tournament, got selected, and then as most officials are aware, on the NCAA level, when you call a tournament and you come down to 10 weights, there's only 10 finals. So if you get selected for a finals match, you are in essence one of the top 10 officials there at the tournament, and was selected for NCAA finals matches. And so even though I was a very seasoned high school and college official at that time, and I've called thousands of matches at the college level, and what I considered would be very successful, at least on the D2, D3 level. My first NCAA final, I remember every piece of it. It was nervous. They're putting a microphone up your shirt, before the finals matches and telling you where the cameras are. We've got 3 cameras located around the mat. Make sure you stay out of the way of these cameras if you want the camera to help you during a replay situation. Where's your assistant? Okay, here's your assistant from another state who you may have called a couple of matches with at the tournament, but you're not totally comfortable with where he's going to be during that match, how you're going to communicate. So all of these things, even though a seasoned official has done it 1,000 times, every level that you step up, those butterflies come back. You get nervous. You try to go through your mechanics. Okay, stay back, stay loud, hold my calls longer, rotate my signals, make sure that everybody sees them, stay patient, let it burn. Don't make the call too fast. It's better to be a half a second late than it is a half a second early in awarding points. All these things, you just go through them over and over as a checklist in your head. And I'm able to give that to brand new officials and tell them the same thing. And so, yes, very vivid memories of several of those steps in my career that we try to pass on to new officials in our mentoring going forward.
That's awesome. So just the emotions kind of, would you compare it at all to like when you were a competitor?
Even more so. When I was a competitor, I was of course I wanted to win, right? You wanted to win as a competitor, and you wanted to help your team out and those types of things. In officiating, there's a couple sides of this. So let me see if I can explain it correctly. There's a couple sides of this. Is one set of officials wants to be totally silent, not seen, not heard of. Nobody knows who you are. Nobody knows your name when you leave the arena. And I hope I escape out of this with no problems at all, and I'm not even noticed. The other side of officials are kind of the opposite. I want every drama. I want every tough call. I want it to come down to 1 second left on whether I make a stalling call that may give another opponent a point and the match is over on that, or the match is tied to go into overtime. They don't want to decide the match. That's the wrong thing to say, but they want to be able to be the decider of the drama and make the decision in a very, very tough match. They want to rely on their expertise and their experience to be able to keep a sanity and a saneness to the match that we're hired to be able to do. And not that they're trying to create the drama, but they like that intensity. They like that adrenaline to be able to do that. I fall somewhere in between. I'm ready for the drama. I'm ready for the tough calls that are there. But at the same time, I want the wrestlers to be totally, for 7 minutes on the NCAA side, to wrestle their match and nobody has any problems with any calls because the wrestlers have it there. Versus, an NCAA final that I had, we sat for a minute and a half in a scramble situation where I'm holding a call, listening for my assistant to see if he's got anything different. And we're in a no takedown situation. We're not quite to a stalemate yet because we've got a deep single with an arm trying to come around the hip, but the other wrestler is fighting off of his knee and trying from an underhook from the front side that we came out of it with a no control. And I've watched the match 100 times. I still come up with the same call, thankfully, but those type of situations are what we live for as an experienced official. And I'm proud to be on the mat for some of those opportunities for sure.
Awesome, man. So you just told us about, your first time on the mat as an official and some of the most memorable ones. Now I want to get into like two of my favorite questions. And one's because one's ridiculous. But I'm kind of ridiculous. Yeah, let's just go with the ridiculous one. You only live one.
Let's do it.
What's the best hospitality room? Where is it? Where can I find it?
Oh man. Was it? You know what? And I should have been ready for that.
I got your answer, man.
I've heard you say it. I've heard you say it on another one, and I should have been ready for it.
You put down Wheaton.
Wheaton is but okay. So I did put down Wheaton, and let me tell you why Wheaton. We've had what I would consider maybe better food at places or higher stakes food or whatever.
It's got to be the ambience, the food. It's got to be everything. You know what I mean?
Right. The reason why I like Wheaton is it's this small little conference room on the second floor at Wheaton University, and they've got all sorts of snacks in there, and they bring in the same pizza every year, and it's just the pizza's fine. Coach Greenwald, the pizza's great. It's no problem with it. But it's
be sure to clarify.
Exactly, it's not a problem with the pizza or things like that. But what it is you get in there, and it's such a small room that you're cramming 12 to 15 officials in there. And Bryce, oftentimes these officials this is the only weekend every year that I get to catch up with these guys from Iowa, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Montana, Wisconsin, Arizona, all across the country. And so our break times oftentimes, which are maybe 10 to 15 minutes or, the 30 minutes we are before competition starts, are the only time in essence that we really have time to catch up. Man, how's your kids? How's the baby? What do you mean the baby? He's 7 years old. Oh crap. Going through these conversations that you get to catch up with these officials that you've called with all of your career. And so the time spent in there with the door shut, no coaches, nobody messing with you, nobody coming and asking questions, pulling you out. We get to catch up. That, to me, that is one of the biggest advantages from a personal standpoint that officiating has given to me, is a brotherhood and a sisterhood of comrades and other officials that we get to share with that and then take it out to the mat. And so Wheaton, it just has special memories to me. Fred Feeney, again, invited me to the Wheaton tournament. I want to say 11 or 12 years ago, and I've been calling everyone since then. And coming from Houston, flying to Chicago, driving to Wheaton, and calling that tournament every year is a highlight of my year. And it just has great memories of that for sure.
Yeah. I mean, you went a different route, which I'm glad you did, because I have a similar kind of feeling about it. Like when I'm a coach, like, it's tough yelling at officials all day, right? And herding cats. So I need a good meal. But there's a tournament that I get to work. There's two of them. There's like our grade school state championship and then our junior high state championship. The food's awesome. The women volunteers that do it, fantastic. They work their tails off. We're talking like 30 officials and hundreds of tournament workers, right?
Sure.
But the coolest thing is like the tables are really close together. And so it's like you can't sit by yourself. You have to pick the seat that's open or else you're just not getting a seat. And you don't want to go around the corner because then you're out where everyone can talk and say, hey, hey, Stripes, I saw you made this call, right? So so you pick a seat and you eat your food, but you're not forced, but you're encouraged to have a conversation, right? Which is cool because not everyone likes to do that, right? And just this last year, I'll tell you what's the coolest thing. I didn't even eat my sandwich. I was hungry too. But there was a table, and I'm from Ohio, so St. Ed's it's the pinnacle. Whatever. But anyhow, so I'm sitting and I look over to my left and I hear some familiar voices, and like it's the St. Ed's table, man. And these dudes are cool, like good, really good people. And then there's the legend, Greg Urbis. He's the coach of St. Ed's. I mean, I think he's got more state titles than years I've been alive. I don't know. And he's just sitting there, just listening, and everyone's talking, and then he'll be quiet and he'll say something, but you get to observe this stuff. And then I'm like, hey man, how you guys doing? Great job this year, because it's 2 weeks after they just won their unteenth one. And then you're after that, and it's just like, man, these people put their pants on one leg at a time,
Yep.
It's cool, and it is a family, and it's wrestling's stressful sometimes. So like when you can just be hidden and have some food and then talk to some brothers that you're only going to see once a year, like you said,
right? Exactly.
If you don't appreciate that, then you got to like kind of reevaluate your priorities, right? Because that's the good stuff.
That's it. Sure. No, you're right. There have been tournaments that I've gone to that you just don't have any interaction time at all, and that's just not of interest to me. My interest is connecting with officials, meeting new officials, sharing stories, and then trying to match up, on a calendar date in the future.
Yeah. So, all right, let's get to the big ones, and then I'm going to let you go. I'm taking a lot of your time, man. But
Sounds good.
It sounds like you've got this question. Not sounds like you've got this pretty much under wraps, but I think we can all get better at it. Obviously, like you said, Texas needs to figure something out because there's high demand.
Sure.
What ideas do you got to get more young people interested in officiating?
We've got to get younger officials coming in is we've got to make sure that we break through to the high school coaches. The high school coaches are our conduit to those, like you mentioned earlier in the cast. We've got to break through to them so that they can get our message across that, hey, no matter what your future is, if you are interested in wrestling at all, there's a good opportunity here. First of all, if you're in college or even if you're not going to college, to earn some good money, right? Wrestling officiating, especially for somebody who's fresh out of high school, it pays really, really well across the country for doing something that you love. You can either go to your job and dig a ditch for 10 hours a day, or you can be in an air-conditioned or heated gym around a sport that you love. Yes, getting yelled at, but doing a sport that you love and actually making a difference and getting a good paycheck out of that. And also it opens up new opportunities for you to see how far you want to advance in doing something that you love like that. Explaining that to my wife all the time, is that, hey, I have a second job or I've got a hobby. My hobby actually pays me to do these types of things. So it's good on that. We've got to get through to the high school coaches so that they can be our mouthpiece for us, whether it's providing them with materials and documents, business cards, websites, whatever it is, to have people sign it up, and even being transparent about the pay scales in your particular state. Hey, here's what the state of Texas pays for a one-day varsity tournament. Here's what they pay for a junior varsity duel, those types of things, so that these graduating seniors and young potential officials can see what type of money, okay, on a Saturday, I can go earn $225 or something similar for doing a one-day tournament. How long am I there? 7 or 8 hours. What am I doing on Saturdays anyway? I don't know, sleeping late, playing some video games. Yeah, exactly.
I'm telling you, when
and
you're
money.
in college, you're either spending money or making money on the weekends. That's all it is.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And then, hey, if you're willing to be a sponge and open up and listen to some of the mentors, now more opportunities come along with that to see how far you want to advance. And even if they're moving out of state, we all are connected. All 50 states are connected in that if you've got a wrestler who's interested in officiating, and especially from Texas, we tell them all the time, if you graduate from Texas and you move to Pennsylvania, I will put you in touch with someone in Pennsylvania who can get you involved. If you move to Colorado, California, Wisconsin, it doesn't matter where. We've got contacts in every state. We are all connected to get you in touch with someone who can do that, much like they do for Texas. So we get constant communications from officials out of state saying, hey, we've got a good graduating senior coming down that way. We want to get him involved or get her involved in that. And so that's my short public service announcement there, Bryce, is we've got to get to the coaches and provide the coaches with the contact information so that they can give to their athletes and stay involved.
Awesome. Thanks, man. That's actually a new take. No one's ever, talked about like the steps, right?
Sure.
Just kind of jump from A to B. And I told you, my job is just to get us from the harbor to the other harbor.
Gotcha.
I like that. So last question for you, the biggest one right now. I'm going to throw you a curveball.
All right.
I'm doing this. It's a challenge. You can choose to accept it. If not, I won't think any less of you, Rex, but we got to do something different. If you keep doing the same things and getting the same results, well, you know what they say about that. It's the definition of insanity. So we got to do something different. If I were to challenge you or ask you to just add one thing to your monthly routine, just do one thing 1 month that you're not doing right now, and that in some way, shape, or form promotes encouraging. I always keep saying young people. It doesn't have to be young people that enjoy wrestling, like encouraging someone who's not an official to maybe explore becoming an official, even if it's just a click on the website and they drop off. Who cares, right?
Sure.
It takes 6 or 7 times to make a sale. I'm in sales, and they tell me that. So hopefully I get to 6 or 7 times when I talk to someone. But would you be willing to entertain the idea of doing one thing, so something 12 times over the next 365 days that you intend to, shine the light on what you love to do and you've been doing and doing a heck of a job for? Is that something you could do?
I will. Absolutely. And as you were saying the question, what popped into my mind is some of the things you said throughout the webcast today, in that new officials sometimes don't quite have the tools they need to be able to get in contact with the right people. And so as the answers were coming out of my mouth 5 minutes ago of having contacts in every state, Bryce, what I will do moving forward from the state of Texas is try to collaborate one single United States contact that will provide at least an email address or a contact that anyone across the country, if you're a new official, you hit this address, you hit this website. Bryce, even if I put it on your website, we put the link on your website, whatever it is, a Twitter handle, a Facebook page, an email address, that if no matter where you're at, if you're in Connecticut, if you're in Arizona, if you're in Idaho, or if you're in Mississippi, that you're interested in being a wrestling official, you contact this one email address or this one social media contact, and we will then broadcast that information to whatever state that you are in to make sure that we put A and C together and make the contact. That's something that's very interesting to me, and I'll take that on from the state of Texas.
Thank you, Rex. You know what? So today, 3 people have agreed verbally. So we'll see what happens. I got one more, so maybe we can make it 4. Not sure where it's going to go. I'll check in with everyone. Man, thank you for your time today. This is fun. I knew when I talked to you on the phone the first time, you're a high energy guy, and I am too. And I'm kind of thankful there's like geographic distance between us, because I don't know what happened if we got in the same room with all this energy.
Sure.
But I hope that we can, man. So, gosh, thanks. Do me a favor, stay on. Don't hop off right away. I want to talk to you about a couple of things. And I hope that you'll do this again with me.
I'd love to, Bryce. And again, hey, everyone, watch out for Texas wrestling. It's taken over the country. It's taken over like a storm. And so here we come.
I'm a fan.
Get on the bus with us.
I'm new.
Thanks so much.
Hey, thanks, Rex.
You got it. Have a great day.